All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our Saturday morning, mid-morning on the East Coast, early morning on the West Coast for all you people who are up early at 8 a.m. with how to get on TV and make it count. Thank you all for being here. If we were all in Denver, this would be the time period of times where everyone is struggling to get up in the morning after a very late night of karaoke or what have you, and dragging themselves unkempt into the morning session at 8 or 9 a.m. Denver time. But we're all virtual, so hopefully you're all in your PJs, being comfortable, doing whatever you need to do. Again, thank you for being here. We're going to hopefully have some fun and learn a lot today. So first and foremost, who am I? My name is Dante Atkins. I'm the founder principal, which is my own LLC, consulting, communications and political consulting company. You can see up at the top what I used to look like in the before times, and now it's
Okay, can we be heard and seen? All right. Sweet.
okay. So we're live. Okay, so for whatever reason, my internet decided to die. So I don't know why that is, but we're just going to go with it, and I will discipline my computer later. So at this point, I'm just going to be reading off my own while Emily is here as well. Sorry about that. We'll just try to make this go. Okay, I've got a bit of an awkward setup now. I apologize for that. Now you can see my nice lamp. So anyway, my background is some of the highlights of my career. I managed statewide races in California for a while. I also was the campaign manager for a senior congressional the communications director for a senior congressional Democrat. My internet might be back, so I'm going to try hopping myself on again, and I'm really sorry about this difficulty.
Never a dull moment around here.
All right, how are we doing?
Looking and sounding good, Dante.
Okay, mute that. Okay, so back to the app here. There we go. Are we screen sharing? We doing just fine?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay. Over the course of my years doing comms, I've coordinated probably about 500 or more segments on cable, digital, and local TV. I transitioned from, a few years ago being like, oh my God, like my boss is going to be on TV, to, oh boy, here we go again, which hopefully is the point you're going to be at soon too. I've attended every single Netroots Nation. This is my first training. I'm really excited to be doing this as long as my internet remains stable. Netroots Nation is like my family. Been doing this conference for, 15 years. But what really keeps me coming back isn't the people, it's the t-shirts. Netroots Nation has the best convention t-shirts of anyone out there. Do yourself a service, make sure you order one. I also want to just be clear that what I'm going to be talking about today is primarily dedicated to getting you, or if you're a communications person, the head of your organization or whoever you're pitching, to be a talking head on TV. This is mainly how to become a pundit, right? Or how to get your boss on TV as a pundit, or whatever it happens to be. If we're talking about getting your action on TV or getting TV news, like covering an event or something else like that, That's much more in the domain of traditional communications and pitching as opposed to this. On Thursday, Christy Setzer of New Heights had a very good training on that. So make sure you go back through if that's what you're interested in, watch that. This is going to be more about you being a talking head on TV, how to get there. We're going to be going through the entire process of how that should look. So we're going to go through a bunch of things here. What shows can you pitch and why? How do you write a good pitch? How do you get ready for your segment? How do you make the segment as good as possible? And how do you maximize the effectiveness of your appearance? So this is what we're going to be talking about today. Again, for anyone who may have been joining late, if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box. Emily will be reading through them, and any questions that anyone has, she'll just pop up, chime in, read them. I'll answer them. She's been on TV a couple of times herself. This is a drill that she knows very, very instinctively. So one of the first things that I want to go over is the types of TV that you can pitch. And this is important because on a lot of the listservs that I'm on, or email chatter, or people asking me for my contacts, one of the things that I always get is, so does anyone have a contact with, this week with George Stephanopoulos, or does anyone have a booking contact for Rachel Maddow? And that's great. Obviously, that's very aspirational. That's cool. You're trying to get, your nonprofit on Rachel Maddow, whatever it happens to be. But that may not be the best place to start. There are a lot of different things that you can do. And so we're gonna just go over that real quick first. There's a lot out there. There is just probably a limitless amount of TV that you can go over and try to get. You have streaming and digital platforms. And what are some examples of those? Oftentimes, news networks have digital exclusive content that is not the same as what you see on the network. So for instance, there's such a thing called NBC Online, which does news. It's an entirely streaming platform. They are going to cover different types of things than what's going on regular network NBC or MSNBC, things like that. There are some others that are like that as well. Cheddar was something that when I was in Congress, we would go on every so often. It is a streaming digital exclusive network that's targeted for younger millennials. Bloomberg News has its own digital, and there are plenty of other things like that out there. Hill TV, for instance, there's a lot out there. So do consider digital platforms, especially if you're new to this, looking for things to pitch, things like that. Local news. Why would you want to target local news as opposed to something like, Rachel Maddow or something, things like that? Well, it's really important. If you are a local organization, local nonprofit, local candidate, local news is going to be your bread and butter. A lot of people watch it, especially, older people, for just your regular local network news. That's going to be important for you depending upon who you are. If you're a community organization, like I said, local candidate, definitely something to consider. And local news, they're overworked. They're looking for ways to fill airtime. That's just something you're going to want to consider. So definitely be contemplating that. A fortiori, non-English language networks, your local Telemundo or Univision affiliates, other secondary language broadcasts. If you're trying to reach particular communities because that's the work that you do, or that's your voter demographic, those are things you're going to want to consider. Business networks, they're often easier to get on than your traditional network. CNBC, you're going to have a much easier time than MSNBC. Same with Fox Business as opposed to Fox News, if that's what you're going for. Bloomberg also, if you can go for, Bloomberg doesn't have the same reach. It's not on as many packages, but that's definitely something to consider as well. If you're going for the main networks, off-peak is a lot easier than peak. Early morning, daytime, the weekend afternoon shows, they're all looking to fill airtime, and they may not be like the particular hosts that you know, or that you may think is particularly noteworthy, or names that you recognize. But again, these shows need to fill airtime. They're looking for experts to fill it with, so definitely contemplate that. The evening cable shows that are, not the Maddows or Tucker Carlson's, there's a lot out there. That's basically going to be your, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. segments, and then off peak past, the 8 to 9 and 9 to 10 hours. And then the hardest are the Sunday shows. That's, your This Week with George Stephanopoulos or CNN State of the Union. Those types of shows where basically that's organized at the highest levels, right? Where, that's where the political parties themselves, or, the Senate caucuses, et cetera, the presidential campaigns, those are the shows where they decide who they're sending out to convey their message. That's not going to be, unless under very rare circumstances, that's not going to be the type of thing that you're necessarily going to be able to have that much access to. And do we have any questions so far? Okay, let's answer it.
Mira asks, business networks are easier because they have less content than general news?
It's not that business networks have less content. It is that anything that doesn't have as much viewership doesn't have as much competition. Which means that it will be much easier probably for, if you're just trying to start out, it'll be much easier for you to try to get on the news segments of a business network than it will be for you to get on the news segments of the major, of the flagships. So in general, easier to get on Fox Business than it is to get on Fox News. There's less competition. Generally, the less viewership something has, the easier it is for your pitches to be successful. The one thing that I haven't mentioned in the slide presentation is C-SPAN. C-SPAN is always looking to fill their airtime. And hey, it's TV, it's professionally produced. That is definitely something that you should consider as well. I probably should have had that. If I did put C-SPAN on here, probably put it in the off-peak variety in terms of like how easy it is to get on. But C-SPAN's looking to fill political content, news content. You can probably get on there pretty easy.
You also have a question, how about Democracy Now?
Any of those shows, so Democracy Now! Is going to be a very partisan, obviously left wing, which is, the environment that we're operating in. So anything that you do on Democracy Now! Is going to be viewed through that lens. And everything that you do is going to be viewed through a particular lens that way, right? If you're on MSNBC, well, that's slightly left liberal, CNN, whatever. Go for, the general advice I have for you on this sort of thing is go for whatever you can. This is, maybe you might have, some connections there. But in general, go for whatever you can. This is mainly focused on how to get on, the big networks here. So that's what I'm going to be really talking about. Democracy Now! Or any one of the other TV, radio, digital streaming services that are like left-leaning news content like that, go for broke. Do whatever you can. So why would you try for lower rated shows? Well, the main thing is that they're a lot more beneficial than you might think they are. So just go through that in a couple of ways. First of all, let's say that, you're the head of an organization or, communications for an organization, and you manage to get your boss on a 6 a.m. MSNBC show or something like that, or maybe weekend afternoon, you manage to do that. Well, your organization is still going to be able to promote that, and your boss is still going to be able to promote that, fairly easily, right? And it's going to make you look good. If, for instance, you get yourself on TV because you're pitching yourself as a pundit, and then, you take a screen cap of that video and you make it your Facebook profile picture, for instance, right? No one's going to be, when people see that, all they're going to be seeing is, hey, you were on MSNBC, right? No one's going to be taking a look at, oh, what show was that this person with the profile pic of them being a pundit, or when did that air, right? No one's going to be doing that. You made yourself look important. You've given yourself stature that way. It's good for your internal communications. You can take that segment, digitize it, put it put it in your email blast, put it on your social blast. You can tell your grant writers that this is something that you do, right? It makes yourself look effective. And that's whether you're on peak, off peak. If you're on camera, it's good. So you don't want to let, the perfect, if you consider it the perfect, be the enemy of the good there. So we have a question?
Yes, we do. David asks, I'm going to be on local TV because I am a DNC Joe Biden delegate, but I want to talk about pesticide and education issues besides talking about being a DNC delegate. How can I change the narrative during the interview to the other issue that I want to advocate?
So that's something that we're going to get into later about what your talking points are. There are some things that I would caution there, which is that if you were brought on to discuss a particular subject, namely being a DNC delegate for Joe Biden, which congratulations on that. That is not an easy accomplishment. I was a 2012 delegate for Obama in Charlotte. Not an easy thing. Congratulations on that. So there are particular ways that you're going to want to do that. And, on camera training, first and foremost, I just want to say this is its own thing. What I'm doing here is more of pitching, but I'll give you some tips on that, right? Learn your transition points very well and rehearse them. So here's what I would tell you. You're going to be brought on to talk about being a DNC delegate for Joe Biden, right? In the course of that conversation, you may have an opportunity to say why you ran for delegate, right? And in that case, you can transition to talking about, I ran for delegate because these are the issues that I care about, and I want to make sure that they get heard on the DNC, right? That way you get to talk about your concerns, but you still get to make it relevant. What you don't want to do is just say, oh, look at me, I'm on TV now. By the way, pesticides are bad, because then you're kind of railroading the conversation. Make it natural. So that's what I can tell you about for now. We'll go into that a bit more later, because I will cover how to make it a good interview shortly in this training. But we'll be getting there momentarily. I hope that answered your question a little bit for the time being.
And then I have a question based off of the previous question that we had about Democracy Now!
Sure.
When you talk about things that are beneficial for your reel, would you say that shows like, like Democracy Now! Or like some of these progressive streaming, the Bill Press show, would you say that those are good for your clips, or could you leverage that into a bigger TV appearance?
Absolutely. Bill Press was one of my favorite go-tos. I love Bill Press and his show. Yeah, anything like that is going to be good for you. What you don't want really, because what you want to convey when you're doing these things for your demo reel, and we're going to get to this, you want to convey your competence. Right. So even if, for instance, you're on Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham, if you've done that in the past, I wouldn't recommend doing that now. But if you've done that in the past and you did that well, absolutely. Right. When you're pitching producers or bookers, it's really all about how you come across on camera. And that booker is not really going to care who your interlocutor was too much, as long as it's not really, really extreme. Like, provided you're not going on, whatever Stormfront streaming thing is, right? Then you're going to be fine, right? Just as long as it's relatively mainstream and acceptable, it's going to be good for your demo reel, right? And on that note about the demo reel, definitely work to building it up. That's why doing these online things, or even doing C-SPAN, or doing anything that's easy for you to get onto, you just want that foot in the door, right? Because that's what allows you to build that demo reel, to be able to put these things on YouTube, not just to promote them for yourself on social, but to be able to really build that archive. And when you're going for something higher rated, you can say, look, this is what I've done. Here are my camera appearances. I'm ready for this. And that'll make, and if you haven't been on a show before, that's what's going to get people to take a chance on you if you're maybe a lesser known entity. So I would really recommend that. Just saw another question pop up.
Oh yeah, so Laura Packard, hello, asks.
Hello, Laura.
Sorry. What is a demo reel these days? Is it a Google Drive folder of clips, or your YouTube channel, or what?
So one of the things that I did when I was in Congress is I made sure that, well, not in Congress, worked in Congress, sorry, I would put everything on YouTube, because that's just easy, right? You can maintain it internally however you want. But Laura, I know you've done plenty of TV yourself. I would really recommend building an archive, and I'll get to this in a little bit later in the presentation, but build an archive of your appearances where you categorize, where you have full access to the links ready-made, categorize them by date and by topic, right? That'll let you know what you've said on a previous issue, and that way if you're pitching something, you'll be able to send those links and they're going to be ready at hand, right? You don't want to have to go digging through. You really just want to do the work up front to be able to catalog all this stuff ahead of time. For me, it was always YouTube. That was just the easiest thing for me to do, was to be able to, send some YouTube links as opposed to sharing hard video on a Google Drive. That's a little bit more impractical. So, and then the other reason to do these lower rated shows, we've talked about that for a little bit. It's really good practice. It's lower stakes for everyone. They're a lot easier to get on. It's really advantageous to you if you do get on. If you screw up, well, you then embarrass yourself in front of millions of people. Embarrassing yourself in front of millions of people is not so good. I did that on Jeopardy. I don't recommend it for anyone else.
He didn't embarrass himself.
I lost. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. This is a question that I get, and so I just figured I would address it now. The Fox News question: should you go on Fox? And I have some feelings about that. So in the presidential primary, you had this relatively contentious debate between, some of the Bernie Sanders people and some of the Elizabeth Warren people, where, the Bernie wing of people kind of were saying, well, we're going to do these Fox News town halls because we've got to reach, the white working class voters, and you got to be talking to people who aren't with you, et cetera. And, sort of the Elizabeth Warren faction was saying, Fox News is a hate for profit racket. We're not going to validate them. We're not going to go on there. I will never do a Fox News town hall. So, people sort of fell on either side of those divides. And I just want to say that argument is not relevant for you. If you're going to be deciding whether to go on Fox News, it's not going to be based on that. And here's why. Because Fox News is not going to be selling advertising of itself as a neutral arbiter based on a segment that you do. They were going to do that with Bernie. They were going to do that with Elizabeth Warren. They're not marketing themselves based off of you. So you don't really need to worry about funding their hate for profit machine that way. But there are some things that you need to consider that you may not have considered. First and foremost, how is your audience going to react to the fact that you are on Fox? That's only a question that you can answer. If you think that, if you're a nonprofit who depends on grants, if your grant writers if your funders are going to be theoretically weirded out that you went on Fox, that's something you're going to need to actually consider. If your activist base for small dollar donations is going to be upset that you went on Fox, that's something you're going to want to consider. But if you're a local candidate in a swing district, you may have a different perception of that. You may want to be reaching as many voters as possible. What I can tell you on this topic is that when I worked in Congress, all party committees strongly encouraged their members, especially in frontline swing districts, to go on Fox. They made it a priority point, and my former boss went on Fox a lot. And so they brought us in often to talk to other members about how to handle Fox interviews. And they did that because not everyone who watches Fox is a wingnut. The audience for, your regular Fox News programming, which might appear on airports or, in shops and stores, et cetera, isn't going to be always the Tucker Carlson demographic. So it may have benefits to you depending upon who you are. Only you can weigh the advantages and the drawbacks of going on Fox News. However, there are some other things to consider. There's always the question of, are you validating them as a legitimate news network? Simply by going on there as, a theoretically left-wing or progressive figure, that act by itself can sort of convey the impression that they're worth going on. That's a little bit of an aggregate thing. Only you can make that determination as to what are the benefits and what are the drawbacks. However, the main job of a Fox News host is to screw you. I just want to put that out there because that's what they do. You have to be ready for the techniques that Fox News hosts will use on you. to be able to make their points. If you are an organization that is progressive, that is promoting progressive values, they're going to try to trip you up. They're going to try to distract you from your main point to try to win on a small issue, so that you get off your narrative, so that they can fit the broader programming that they want to do. Being on Fox is a high risk, high reward operation if you choose to do it. But really be thinking about that. Don't go in there thinking, yeah, I got this, only to be outgunned by someone who is taking a narrative in a direction that you didn't expect. You really want to rehearse that, make sure you're ready for it. Here's a last point. If you are going to choose to go on Fox News, you got to get buy-in from your entire staff all the way down to your interns, if you're an organization. If it's just you, this is your own consideration, but here's what I'll tell you. When I worked in Congress and we went on Fox News a lot, one of the things that I would do is I would warn the interns in the Capitol office, I would warn the interns in the district office that, hey, boss is about to go on Fox News, be prepared for the hate speech on the phones, because you'll get it, and it's not fun. Be thinking about the people who have to answer the phones, especially if they're women, LGBTQ, people of color. The people who tend to watch Fox News and be active in terms of their responses are not nice people. Your Facebook comments, your Twitter feed, if you have a public phone number. If you do a Fox News appearance, the more people are watching it, the higher the rating of the show, the more likely it is that you are going to be subject to a vitriolic, sexist, racist barrage on your phone and social media feeds. If everyone has the buy-in and is comfortable with that, then go ahead and do it, but be warned that's what you're going to get. Let everyone who's involved in your organization know that's what they're going to get, because it can be mentally taxing. As the person who was managing all the Facebook and social media, that gets exhausting to see every so often. And I'm a white dude and it's still exhausting to see. Emily went on Tucker Carlson once, a few years ago, and her social media was ugly for a long time. People even started tweeting sexist stuff at me because I was engaged to her. And it's not fun. And so be prepared for that. Make sure your staff is prepared for that if that's what you choose to do. Yep. Yeah, we're doing good so far. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes of official presentation time to go. So we're gonna try to move through a little bit here a bit more quickly. So how do you pitch? You wanna get the right contact, and this is harder than it may seem because these shows, each show, like the dedicated shows, Chris Hayes, Wolf Blitzer, et cetera, they generally have dedicated producers. The daytime TV and whatnot, they generally have like a rotating cast. So this can be harder than it may seem. And also they change around a lot. So the best ways to know how to pitch or who to pitch, right, is if you have one of these subscription services like Cision or Muck Rack that are really expensive, they'll provide that for you. However, if you don't have one of those, you're going to probably need to phone a friend. I have a lot of these contacts. If you have friends in the PR world, they'll have a lot of these contacts. So just try to figure that out. But you're going to need to try to make sure you have an in advance to be able to find the proper pitching contact. And they change around a lot. So the mere fact that you had one a couple of months ago doesn't mean that's current now. This is a constantly updated process. I have a list from about a week ago. If you want a particular contact, email me. I'll have my email at the end of the presentation. I'll be able to provide something for you. Always email. Email is by far the preferred method. If you have a phone number for a booker or producer, don't call it. You're just going to annoy them. That phone number is really used for immediate contingencies. If you call them to try to pitch, they're not going to remember that. And all you'll do is annoy them. And even if they do remember who you are, you're making yourself look worse. Just don't do it. Always email. That's how they want to be contacted. Is your pitch relevant or topical for the current news cycle? And this is a big one because, and this applies to all PR, whatever is going on at the moment is something you're going to want to pitch, and the news cycle moves fast. So you've got to really make sure that, you know, you're not trying to create your own news cycle. You can, if it's really explosive. Otherwise, you're going to have to make yourself relevant to whatever the current issue is that's going on. That's really hard in today's media environment. What with COVID, what with Trump changing the news cycle every 30 seconds, it's really difficult. So you've got to be really fast and really responsive and ready to go at a moment's notice. Is this pitch customized for the show and the host that you're pitching? That's another important one. You want to, if you can, especially if you're trying to pitch a show with a dedicated host, one of the things that you're going to want to do is, have you done the research? Do you know, is this a topic that you know that is relevant to this host? Have they covered it before? Are you following up with a particular thing? Can you say something like, you know, I saw the segment you did 2 days ago on this, and I know that this is an interesting topic and that's something you're covering, and I have something to add to that, right? That shows that you've been following this a lot, that you're not just making a blanket PR pitch to every single show that you can, but that you've actually done the work to say, hey, this is something you're interested in. I can help you. You can help me. Let's work together. Make sure that you explain what your qualifications are and why you're the expert on a particular topic. Obviously, you don't want to be, you know, really grossly self-promoting, but if you're trying to get on TV, you've got to be able to convince the person, the booker, the host, that you're the good person to do this, right? So you've got to walk the line there between being really, you know, Trumpianly grandiose, which obviously you don't want to do, and underselling yourself to the point of, like, why would I put this person on? You've really got to try to find a happy medium there. And, you know, that can be difficult, but just make sure that you're really demonstrating your qualifications, the work that you've done, the work that your organization has done, and that you're just putting that out there in, you know, a expressive but somewhat modest way. And this is not an easy thing. You're going to be rejected much more often than not. It is hard to do this. You know, like maybe probably throughout the course of my time, you know, even working for a senior member of Congress, maybe I got affirmative responses or bites on 10 to 15% of my pitches. For everyone else, that's going to be a lot lower. You just really, this is a months-long project to try to get on cable TV. You've really got to work at it, and don't get frustrated. It's basically a sales job, and I know we don't really like doing that kind of sales job, but that's what it is. Persistence is key. You'll get one eventually, and then you can really start building that up. We have a question?
Okay, so do producers usually tell you they're rejecting you or just ignore you? Is it worth replying to a rejection to set up for another time?
If it depends, try to read between the lines. If you get ignored, that sort of tells you something. If someone, if a producer says, you know, not this week, but, you know, we'll see if we can fit you in, respond positively, respond politely. But this is just a read between the lines kind of thing where, you know, if they're just being polite but rejecting you permanently, that's sort of, there's no real way for you to know that. You just, you know, got to keep the interaction smooth and consistent. You know, being polite and building relationships is really just about the most important thing that you can do. Lastly on this, pitch more than one show at a time and don't limit your options. If you get more than one bite for the same time frame, good for you. That's a good problem to have. Worry about that problem when you come to it. Don't worry about it right now. Okay, so let's say that you get a bite. I know we have a question. I'll get to it in a little bit. The news cycle moves really fast. So you really want to be making sure that if you're in the business of pitching, you're checking your email all the time, because if you're not, these producers could, even in the span of an hour or 2 hours, move on to someone else, given how quickly their spots fill up and given how quickly the news cycle moves. If you're pitching, you got to be on, you got to be responsive. Make sure that the producers have your text, have your cell phone number for texting in case that may be, but you got to be on your game. So just be consistent about that. If things are moving to the point where it looks like you're going to have a segment, be as prepared as possible. Ask the producer for a list of questions so you can prepare early. Usually the way these segments work is if you got like 3 or 4 minutes, the host is going to have an interview flow where there's a series of questions, like 3 or 4 questions that they're going to want to ask you, right? So you want to make sure that you know what those are. You want to prepare talking points and rehearse those talking points, concise talking points for all of these things. Internalize those, make sure you can recite them in your sleep. I can't tell you how important that is. And then lastly, what I would say is pay attention to the news and be prepared to respond to news topics as they come up. Again, the news cycle moves really, really fast, like twice as fast as it did even back in 2016 and 2017 now, with the absolute chaos that's going on. You can be brought up to do a particular segment, and then that could change half an hour before your appearance. Because, you know, someone just destroyed, the Trump administration just destroyed another federal agency, right? And so you may be asked about that. You're always going to need to be thinking ahead, checking the news, being prepared to respond to new topics as they come up. You don't want to be caught flat-footed in an interview and people are going to want to talk about whatever's going on topically right now. So you can't just confine yourself to saying, oh, well, I was brought on to talk about immigration, so I'm just going to, you know, no one's going to ask me about the post office. You don't really get to do that on cable news. You've got to be prepared to respond to whatever new thing comes up as it comes up. We have a couple of questions.
Yeah. Okay, so Kayla Bamberger asks, regarding customizing your pitch to the show host, any tips on how to efficiently consume as much TV news as possible? How to keep track of all the different shows and what they're covering or prioritizing?
Oh man, I hope you have friends that are good staff. This is one of the hardest things to do. And thank you for the question. It's a good one. One of the things that, you know, since my former boss in Congress was very, very eager about getting on TV, one of the things that I had to do all the time for my job was figuring out what everyone was talking about on all the news networks. That included Fox News. So that I could try to do these pitches. And it was really hard because all I had was me and a press secretary, maybe some assistance from a couple other people. And I also had a life. So that wasn't easy. I felt like I was my own personal version of Media Matters. Twitter is really helpful for this. You can have a dedicated list, and this is something that I would recommend doing. Build your own list of the Twitter feeds of all the various shows that you're talking about, because whatever they're putting on their Twitter feeds and the segments that they're putting on their Twitter feeds is generally what's most exciting to them, right? So build a curated list on Twitter of all the show hosts that you're contemplating pitching so that you can see what they're tweeting about. So then that gives you an idea of the types of things that you can pitch on. We have a couple more questions.
Yeah, and then speaking of Twitter, another question here from Susan Roth. Do you ever use Twitter to follow up on an email pitch in case the pitch wasn't seen? Also, do you email more than one contact at a show?
If I have more than one contact at a show, I'll email them both. Hi, Susan, nice to see you. Because too many is way better than too few. What I have done in the past is, yes, I have done that to follow up on a pitch, but only in a DM. I will not, you know, make sure, because this can be embarrassing if you use your Twitter account that has a lot of followers or whatever, and you just tweet at a particular, you know, show handle in public. Nah, you don't want to really be doing that. Make sure it's a DM, and you can do that. But generally, the people who do the social media aren't going to be the same as the people who are doing the booking. So, you know, it's a more indirect contact. It's something that I would only do really as a matter of desperation, in case I really needed something urgently and I'm just trying to reach out across all channels. Do we have any others? Or is that it?
Anonymous attendee asks, any best practices for email pitch subject headlines? How do we ensure they even open the email in the first place?
If you're pitching, they'll read it. It's their job. It's what they're going to do. I would just be, for the email subject headlines, I would just be as direct as possible. And what are you trying to pitch? Let's say you're trying to pitch that yourself as, say, let's say there's some news on DACA and you want to talk about that because you're an immigration expert, right? You can say, immigration expert available to discuss new DACA ruling or something like that, right? That's an intriguing thing because you're positioning yourself as an expert. It's around breaking news that's topical. And then that'll be a good subject headline. You know, for me, when I did this a lot in Congress, it was really easy because I can just use the name, right? And then that speaks for itself. But if, you know, you're not a member of Congress, you need to make sure that you identify in your subject line what your leading qualification is. If your name doesn't really mean that much to people, then who you are, like immigration expert or election attorney or whatever it happens to be around what you're trying to do for the relevant pitch, that's what you're going to want to make sure to include in your subject line. We supposedly have about 8 minutes to go. I'm going to try to.
And we,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the panel ends at 11:50, but we can keep Q&A going until a hard stop at 11:58.
Correct.
So if y'all want to stick around
Yeah.
past 11:50, we will be here.
Yeah, I'll be here past 11:50. I'll try to make sure for those who are trying to coordinate their time and want to be in hallways that I run through this for a little bit. But I'll be here until, you know, anyone wants to.
Finish the presentation, then take more
That's
questions.
exactly. So let's say you manage to do this and it's interview day. If you're going in studio, you want to get there early and you want to make sure that you've, you know, in the old days, we would have said MapQuested, Google Maps, whatever, plan to get there early. You really would much rather get there 45 minutes early than 5 minutes early. Promise you that. Minimum of 15 minutes early. You got a lot to do. You don't know what the process is or what the parking situation is. Don't screw that one up. Just really plan on that, because being late for a segment, you probably won't get invited back. Sorry, that's just the way that is. If you're in studio and they accept makeup, just do it. I know that especially for male presenting people, that may not be a thing. It's like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. But believe me, do it. You may be flushed. You may have rosy cheeks. You may have forehead shine. Just let them do it. They're professionals. It's worth it. And I know even if you're not used to it, it's fine. Believe me, don't be that guy. Be polite in the green room because you never know who's going to be there. As part of my duties as a staffer, et cetera, I have met I've made quite a few contacts with journalists and other important people just from sitting in the same MSNBC or CNN green room. It's a really valuable thing. Those are connections that you can make because you're all in a relatively safe environment. You also, you know, need to be polite on the other end. One time I was in Tucker Carlson's green room with Matt Gaetz and his staff sitting right next to them. And it's at moments like that that you're wondering how your life came to this. But in any case, still, regardless of the side of the aisle you're on, just be polite to the people, make those connections. You're all in the same space trying to do the same thing. So it's a good way to make connections, but you also don't want to embarrass yourself or leak stuff. It's not private. If you're streaming or at home, check your lighting and setup. Make sure that, you know, make sure that your setup is good. Make sure you know how to look at that camera because it's a pinhole thing. It's not easy. This especially applies if you are a person of color because technology is racist. I mean that seriously. The way that autofocuses, white balance especially, are designed is for white people. That's just the truth of the matter. So really practice that setup. Convey Communications, Arshad Hassad and Vicky Roosh, they are sponsors of Netroots Nation. They are specialists in how to do this. If you have questions or you don't really know how to do this, I would really recommend scheduling something with them. They're masters, they're professionals, friends of Netroots Nation.
And Arshad is in here. Hello, Arshad.
Hello, Arshad is actually in here. Arshad, if you're there, enjoy. That's a shout out because you guys do excellent work, and I really enjoyed your presenter training as well. Definitely look up Arshad if you want to know how to do this. And again, practice looking at that camera and not at the screen. It's a tiny pinhole. It's really difficult. It can get really off-centered and off balance. We have a question?
Yeah, we'll just save it.
Okay, we'll save questions for the end, thanks. So interview itself, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because on-camera training is its own thing. But if you don't have the time or the budget for on-camera training, I'm just going to give you some basic pointers for you to practice. One is Speak slower and deeper than you think you need to. When you're on camera or when you're nervous, your voice will have a tendency to go high and you'll have a tendency to talk really fast. Practice counteracting that. Make sure you catch your breath, speak in short phrases. Be concise and don't filibuster the host. Like I said, you may have 2 to 3 minutes and that's it. And the host will have 3 or 4 questions that they want to ask you in a narrative so that they can get through all the things that they want to do. What that means is if you give a minute-long response to something because you're rambling, the host doesn't get through everything, you don't sound good anyway, and nobody wins that exchange. So make sure you have concise, simple answers that are as dense as possible to the questions that the host is asking you. Let them control the narrative if it's a friendly interview. If it's not a friendly interview, circle back to your talking points, redirect. You can always say, you know, well, I don't know about Kamala Harris's citizenship. That's not really what I came here to talk about, but here's what I can tell you, right? Remember to do that because they'll try to get you off of your talking points, whatever it happens to be, to try to get you caught up in something that you don't want to be talking about. That's their job. After you're done, make sure you thank your host. Make sure you thank the on-site staff. Make sure you thank the producer, anyone else that you were in touch with. I can't tell you how important it is to be nice. These people who work in TV are fast-paced professionals. They don't want to be dealing with jerks. And likelihood is that any problem you had with the segment, or if you didn't like the interview, that's not the producer's fault. That's not the booker's fault. They're just doing their job. If you're a jackass to the producers, to the bookers, whatever, it's going to be a lot harder to be invited back. So those are just things that you need to consider. The other thing that I would also tell you is that relationships with the producers and bookers are things that you carry with you. You may work with a daytime producer for MSNBC at one point, and then the next thing you know, in a couple of months, that booker or producer could be the person producing Rachel Maddow, right? That's sort of how that goes. That's happened to me before where contacts that I developed early on, all of a sudden in a few months became producers and bookers for really top level shows. And because they knew who I was, that gave my pitches an additional in. So much of this is also about relationship building in addition to your expertise. And we may not really like that, but that's the way the business works. So do remember that. So after the show, have a plan to get the video. And this is difficult and it's important because if video does not appear on the internet by magic, people actually get it there from cable news. So do you have a plan to get it? There are subscription services, media monitoring services that you can use. TV Eyes, Critical Mention. They're pricey, less pricey than the journalist or contact subscriptions, but still pricey. You can download the video from there. If not, you're going to have to try to get it some other way, whether that's emailing the producer. They'll be getting you the segment. Can you phone a friend who can cut video for you? That's up to you. Maybe you have those contacts. Either way, you've really got to make sure that you have a plan to get it, because otherwise you just did this segment and then you're going to be like, oh man, I want to share this, but I don't know how to get it. Make sure you have that planned out in advance. Share it on social media. Again, professional social media trainers can train you in the best practices for doing this, but usually for Facebook, you want to embed the actual hard video. For Twitter, YouTube link might be good, and tag the show and the host account. This is a collaborative, cooperative process. Mention on your Twitter that you were on, this show, with this host, at this host. They want to see that you're promoting them. That will make this a collaborative process whereby you can maintain a friendly, cordial relationship, promote each other. Everybody wins that way. Making good TV and promoting good TV is a responsibility of both the network and you, and everybody wins that way. Use it in emails to your list. You were on TV, you can really promote that to your donors, to your followers, your subscribers, your grant funders, whatever it happens to be. Really maximize that. Sell it. They'll see that you're selling it. you'll see that you're selling it. The entire point of doing this isn't just to promote your cause, but also to promote yourself. I'm a communications person. I can say that. I don't feel ashamed of it. You shouldn't feel ashamed of it either. You're here for a reason, and it's not just, and promoting your causes equals promoting yourself in a lot of these ways. Because if you're an expert and you want to be talking about this and you want to be making a difference, you've got to give yourself the platform to do it. So just don't feel any shame about that. Just go for it. And then the last thing for this particular presentation is maintain an archive of your appearances for future use and to keep yourself consistent. Like when I worked in Congress, we did hundreds of these TV appearances. And what I would do is I had an archive of everything of every time my boss appeared on any visual platform, whether it was digital, cable, whatever it happened to be. And I maintained an archive of the topics, the links to the YouTube, et cetera, so that way, the next time he was booked on something, I could give him a review of everything that he had said in that about that topic for the past 6 months. And there were some reasons that I did that. One was I wanted the talking points that we used to be consistent. If they needed to evolve in some way, depending upon new stimuli, I would do that. But also, this was especially important for dealing with Fox News, because one of the things that Fox News likes to do, if they want to, you know, if you've been on there a lot or whatever, they will take excerpts of things that you've said in the past. They've got a good research department. They will use it. They will take excerpts of things that you've said in the past, and then they will try to catch you in a contradiction with what they expect you to say now. So you want to be prepared for that if you're going on something that's theoretically a hostile interview. If you've been on TV before, make sure you know what you've said before, because you don't want to be caught flat-footed staring yourself in the screen, telling yourself the opposite of what you just said a few months ago. So that's that for the presentation. We've got a few minutes left to answer questions in a rapid fire, so I'm going to try to do that.
Indeed. All right. So a couple of Q&As. Thank you, Susan. She says, Susan Ross says, I've been booking clients on TV for decades, but I still learn from your session. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Susan. We'll see you on the PCDC list.
All right, David. Does it help to send a bio with your pitch to news organizations in general, or just pitch that you are an expert on a subject?
The more information that you can, and keep it short and simple. I wouldn't recommend attaching a full bio. No one's going to read it. You need a concise synopsis, a short paragraph at most.
Yep. Jocelyn asks, any tips for pitching to and interviewing with non-English media when my pundit only speaks English?
You need to just really be clear about the producer ahead of time about what the expectations are. My boss in Congress went on Telemundo Univision pretty frequently, did not speak basically maybe 2 words of Spanish, but they were going to caption it. And so it's something that we did. If you're going on there, they're going to be happy. They will be able to provide captions for translation, but work with the producer on that ahead of time.
Okay. Jocelyn also asks, you suggested pitching more than one outlet at a time.
Yes.
I've heard the opposite advice, pitch one at a time. How to handle getting 2 bites at once, how to choose, how to communicate that back to the producers without hurting the relationship.
You know, they know that this is that people are trying to get on TV and that things may not always work out. If you have to decline an appearance, you have to decline an appearance. But at the early stage of this, right, it is okay to back out. If something doesn't work or if a scheduling thing doesn't happen, it's okay to back out. If you have to make a choice, make the choice that's better for you. But as long as you don't confirm an appearance and then back out of it once it's confirmed, that's what you don't want to do. But you can pitch as much as possible as long as you're not letting someone down the road. Sort of like dating.
Okay, Jocelyn asks, given how fast you have to move in this business, how do you take care of yourself? E.g. carve out non-work time, no device time, etc.
Well, that's an interesting question, depending upon whether you're the boss or whether you're a communications director that works for the boss. I might have different advice depending, but if you're the boss and you have a communications team working on this, please understand what they have to go through to be able to try to get you on TV. And if you're the communications person, you've got to be clear about what your expectations are. You're not going to be able to be on your email every 5 minutes over the weekend, even when you're sleeping. You just got to be patient with each other.
Kayla asks, okay, sorry. I will sit a little bit closer to the mic. I was supposed to be in a separate room, but then the tech got all wonky. Is there any manual or resource that explains the breakdown of the big cable news networks, local versus national shows and their separate leadership, ownership structures, who answers to who? It's very opaque as an outsider.
It's very opaque as an insider. Good luck. I don't know of any resource like that, but you just gave me a really good idea, and maybe I'll try to build one.
that could be a good idea. And yeah, and if you click on the Q&A box at the bottom, you can see the questions that we previously answered if you weren't able to hear them very well. And there will be
Oh, my contact info. Here
Oh,
you go
yeah,
for
here
anyone
we
who's
go.
still on.
Oh, God,
There
yeah.
you go. My email and phone number for anyone who's still on. That is it. And this presentation will be archived as well, so you can have it that way. Use my cell phone number if you want it. Use my email. It is right there. I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
All right, excellent. Thanks, everybody. Yay! Here's his email. If anybody wants to copy that, definitely reach out. He's very helpful.
And yeah, paste my phone number in there too.
Oh yeah, here we go. Text him. Yep.
Text me, email me, call me, whatever. Here to talk.
All right.
See if there's chat that I can.
Yes.
Hey folks, Spence the volunteer here. Sorry, I just stepped away to put out another fire. Looks like we're all good here. I'm gonna go ahead and end the session. All right, wonderful. We appreciate everyone showing up here. From the bits of that I saw, that was really helpful and informative. Thank you, Dante. Thank you, Emily. You guys have a great
My
day.
pleasure.
Thank you,
This
Spencer.
was delightful for me. Thank you for your help, Spencer.
Yeah, my pleasure, y'all.